Good day. Today we're going to speak about trade agreements. A trade agreement is basically a contractual arrangement between countries regarding their trade relationships. And today we have Etienne, Gideon, myself, Duncan and Benley, and we're going to tell you a little bit more about trade agreements.
Okay, you get different types of trade agreements. You get a unilateral trade agreement, bilateral trade agreement, and multilateral trade agreement.
So for an example for unilateral trade agreements, you can use the African Continental Free Trade Area as an example, and this trade agreement strives to create a single market for trade in Africa, or a single market, and the goal of this agreement is to promote intra-African trade.
Okay, so with this information we decided to go a bit against the grain, especially when it comes to trade agreement. We're going to discuss the JETP,
the Just Energy Transitional Partnership.
And with this, it's not a trade agreement necessarily, but it has a direct influence to our trade because it influences our trade competitiveness in the global market with regards to energy production and with the overall cost of production for the final products.
Yeah, the JETP focuses on reducing carbon emissions through big energy suppliers. So they want us to move to a more sustainable source of energy suppliers, which can include wind farms, anything like that, and move away from fossil fuels in order to decarbonize.
Okay, so the main problem with this entire plan is with South Africa's current crisis when it comes to generation capacity, we already see large negative effects because I think yearly we are losing 125 billion rand just because of load shedding. And that's before the introduction of this agreement. With the new introduction of the agreement and we have to move to more sustainable fuel sources, it's going to take time, a lot of money. I understand we got a lot of money for it, but it's going to take years to be implemented correctly. And with this entire thing, it's going to reduce our current energy production, which will, people will in any case have to use generators to make up for the decrease in energy production capabilities.
Yeah, the best example where you see this currently is in our agricultural industry. Currently, like the EU imposed a new regulation on citrus fruits being exported from South Africa because of a pest known as the false codling moth, which it basically eats citrus fruits. It lays its eggs in them and then the eggs compromise the fruit. And so these fruits have to be cooled at under 2 degrees Celsius for between 25 and 28 days before it is eligible to be shipped to the EU. But currently we don't have any power to run these type of cooling systems on such a large scale. So all of our farmers are losing money because they are looking for new ways to comply with these regulations.
And the main problem with it is you in any case have to run generators now to maintain this. And it's going to increase your product or your production cost or your product shipping cost at this point. And your CO2 emissions is also drastically going to increase because out of our population, almost 70% probably has a generating capacity, especially when it comes to businesses.
Yeah.
And it's pointless if you have to shut down large-scale coal production plants and you're still running on fossil fuels.
And another example is like in the agriculture is like, for example, it's chicken. That most chickens, because of all the load shedding, most of them they don't make it, and then there's not a lot of chicken.
And if you look at the JETP from a future point of view, with a growing emphasis on emission targets, it's going to become emission targets is going to become a prerequisite in trade agreements. So if you don't comply with, for instance, America's targets of emissions, they're not going to
trade with you.
Yeah, they're not going to instigate a trade agreement with you in the future.
No, that's true.
Yeah, but why don't we use solar panels?
Solar panels, the main problem of solar panels is your production cost is extremely high. They're inefficient at this point. You're probably going to use lithium-ion batteries. That's extremely expensive, dangerous to your environment. It only has a lifespan of 8 to 15 years. Then you have to replace it. Your production of solar panels is extremely damaging to your environment. It's exactly the same problem when it comes to wind turbines with your noise pollution, your endangerment of certain bird species. You can't go the nuclear route because it's nuclear at the end of the day and it's not seen as green. So if you go look at the bigger picture, it's not necessarily a trade agreement, but in the future of, or in the direction the world's moving at this point and the current situation in South Africa, when your cost of production increases, it becomes extremely hard to become competitive in a global market. Then we have other things in place as well, with Spain being the largest producer of citrus fruit, just as an example.
Which is also in the EU, so it's almost like the EU is trying to protect itself from other competitors.
Because, they're trying to
And
prevent
they
South
are
Africa
exploiting
from,
our weak points, basically.
and this is a historic event at this point. The thing is, you still have to take into consideration other policies that have been put into place when it comes to trade agreements. Yes, the Ukraine war, it's not really affecting South Africa when it comes to trade agreements, but you're still going to have ripple effect throughout with different policies imposed. South Africa allowing Putin, for example, to come into the country could have a negative effect when it comes to relationships between countries.
Yeah, South Africa is already not on the best terms with America regarding the AGOA agreement, and now Putin's already coming to visit us, and we said we are not going to arrest him. So
Basically, what America is using the trade agreement basically as a negotiation tool against South Africa.
yeah, they're using it as leverage.
Yeah,
So, sorry.
sorry, I can't.
So a trade, in summary, a trade agreement does not take place in a vacuum. There's various factors that have an influence on trade agreements and the relevant ripple effects thereof. So that's why we use the JETP as an example of that ripple effects or that other influences of other things.
And with the JETP, most of you're already going into debt, because if the contract is not going, if the trade agreement doesn't happen, then there's certain stuff that doesn't have.
When we don't comply with the trade, when we don't comply with the agreement of the JEP, firstly, we are currently not. We don't have to pay taxes back to the EU at this point. But as soon as we don't meet the requirements, there are certain taxes or fines imposed, and the government is not going to pay it. Your average citizen is going to pay it because they're going to increase taxes on your energy, on your fuel consumption, on your daily use items. So it's especially crucial when it comes to businesses and the health and safety or the livelihoods of the people of the country to look further into this.
Yeah, so in summary,
you're not working in an enclosed environment when it comes to trade policies. Every policy imposed between two countries can be seen as a trade policy based on the fact it can be seen as a non-tariff barrier, especially when certain restrictions are imposed on certain requirements before shipping products, or when it comes to your production capability, your environmental constraints, and it can also directly affect your pricing, your people, the livelihoods of the people in the country when it comes to jobs, profitability of the company, and your overall market share, and your competitiveness in the
basically
global market.
massive ripple effects.
Massive ripple effects at the end of the day.